So, Chad, there wasn't a lot of meat in the email and the LinkedIn post that went out today on what you're going to tell us and teach us about. So I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Spencer. Appreciate that. So I'm going to do a sort of intro to content marketing. But before I jump into that, I just wanted to ask everybody, how many people are doing content marketing of some way, shape, or form now, or are planning to? This topic is way bigger than we could cover in like 10 to 12 minutes, but I thought I would share a few tidbits of things, some pitfalls and some things that I think are helpful. I'm going to share the slide deck in the chat now. So if you have to jump off early or whatever, you can take that with you. There's some links and resources in it, and then I'll share my screen. Okay, is that showing up okay? So I decided to really drill down on content for lead gen, because content marketing is super broad. And most of the time we're talking about lead gen, but specifically I'm going to talk about lead gen. And if you download the slides, I've got an agenda slide at the top so that you can link through to different resources. We won't go through that. So the first thing is you have some things to decide. The first thing is you don't have to do content marketing. It's okay. If you have other less expensive or easier ways to generate leads, you can get by without content marketing and be just fine. And really that forces sort of a decision to say, okay, is this a program that I really want to do? Content requires a lot of effort. It's not super easy. And so you need to be willing to commit to it over other options. And you shouldn't do that if the other options are cheaper or easier. The other thing is that you may be creating content with other goals in mind. So for example, maybe you're creating content to establish thought leadership in a particular, in your industry or category. Maybe you're generating tools for your sales team to use. Maybe you are building out a content library on your website, or you're creating value for existing followers. All of these are legitimate reasons to do content, and they're not lead gen. Or they could be related to lead gen, but they're not specifically generating inbound leads through a content marketing program. So to focus in on generating inbound leads, it's important, like, so what is this? A lead equals somebody that voluntarily gives you their email. So they're giving you a way to contact them and to reach out to them with additional messages about the value of your product or service. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is build a system, build an engine that allows people, that allows and encourages people to give us their email so that we can market to them. Why would anybody give us their email? Well, because we're going to give them something valuable in exchange. So what we're not going to do is trick, hoodwink, weasel, swindle, hornswoggle, bamboozle, or otherwise do anything shifty to get their email, right? This is part of being a good steward of the dark arts, right? Having marketing tools that we don't abuse. So I had a lot of times people think, well, I'm just going to start blogging. I'm just going to start generating content, and I'm not going to spend too much time worrying about a plan. And I'm going to throw this stuff out there, and people are just going to see it and come. And like I had a really smart CEO that I worked with, and this was his approach. And really what he was doing was building thought leadership and not realizing that he wasn't going through the steps to generate leads. And so he was always puzzled by that. He was like, because he was generating really good content, the quality of it was really high, but it didn't have a plan, it didn't have a structure. And so nobody was finding it, or the few people that were finding it were already part of his audience. And so it wasn't effective in terms of lead gen. And this is really part of the answer. So what you're looking to do is not write what you want to write. You want to write what they are looking for, they being your target market, those prospects. And I put this link in the presentation. This link actually takes you to Jacob Andra's presentation from a couple weeks ago about keyword research, and how, that's an important step of zeroing in on, well, what are people actually searching for? What questions do they have answers for that you can answer? And so you kind of need to go through that process to decide what you're going to write, and it's not a lot of times just what you want. The other thing is that you need some plan, some structure. So I shared this from HubSpot. This is their sort of hub and spoke graphic. And this is important, and this is where that I'm just going to go start blogging falls down, is because those blog posts go out. Some people read them, some people don't, but it doesn't lead people anywhere. And so really, this is the approach that at the very minimum you want to think about in terms of content for lead gen. And so if you look here, there's a couple of kinds of content. You see that there's this dot in the middle with the black circle around it. And then there's all these other little pieces. So you've got the hub and the spokes, or the pillar and the cluster pieces of content. And there's actually a third one, which we talked about a week or so ago, which is lead mags. And here's kind of how they break down. Those cluster pieces of content are the pieces of content that should be very narrowly focused on keywords and keyword phrases. These should answer specific questions, and they don't have to just be articles. They can be videos, they can be press releases, other things that people would run into, but they need to specifically answer the search intent, and then they need to lead to your pillar content. So your pillar content is usually longer form. It's usually more evergreen, where like sometimes you could throw up a piece of cluster content that might be about current events. It might be very ephemeral and doesn't need to, it can be popular in the moment. It doesn't need to persist, but your pillar content should be more evergreen. And then the pillar content drives to a call to action. And the call to action is where your lead magnet is. This is the chunk of value that you're going to exchange with people for their email address. And so just having this sort of framework in place puts you ahead of anybody who's just, I'm just going to go start making content. It's important to kind of recognize that content, a content campaign is usually not an immediate lead generator, right? It takes some time. It takes some time to get indexed. It takes some time for your pages to climb in the rankings for people, for Google and readers to start to value them. And so you need to be prepared for that, especially if you're doing this for somebody else maybe you have a boss who wants you to initiate this campaign, and you need to understand what their tolerance is for the investment and how long the horizon is for their return. So here's a resource. A couple of principles here. One is that even though there is a lot out there about the quality of content, and that your content needs to be, if you go through Google's SEO page, SEO articles, they'll talk about that what they really want is that your content is high quality, that it is useful for the reader. And all of that is true. But at the same time, volume outperforms quality. So this is a little bit heretical, but it's not really hard to understand. It's if you don't have content, or if you have a small amount of content and the quality is high, that will not match as many keyword phrases. It won't generate the number of leads that if you have a volume of content will. That doesn't mean you want to create a volume of content litter, of trash, but you need a process and a way to create some volume in order to like the function of the leads that come in is going to be a factor of the volume of content that you put out. So how do you do that? Well, a big key is having a plan and a template. So in this case, this is a template that I use, and there's a link to this in the slide, so you can download this, and you should build your own template, but this will give you an idea of what one looks like. And so here are the things that I do every time. So for every article that I write, I use an H1 headline with the keyword included. This is basic SEO and also basic content structure. I use an explanatory subhead. This is optional, but I do this, and usually this also doubles as my meta description, or my, it's in the, not the Google snippet, but the preview text when somebody sees the search result. I like to put a reading time on there. I always include an image at the top, and that forces my paragraphs to be short. I always include my first sentence needs to be only one line. It needs to be short. And the reason that I do that is because if somebody, I'm following the AIDA framework, which was developed for print ads like a long time ago, but where you attract attention with your picture and your headline. You develop interest with your subhead, and then you're convincing the reader with your copy. And then ultimately you get to the call to action out in the bottom. So in order for me to convince them, I need them to read it. And one of the things that helps people read is if it's short, they read this first sentence without even thinking about it. And by the time they get to this first paragraph, they've already built up that little bit of momentum that's going to take them and carry them through the copy. Then I usually use this 3-act structure. You don't have to use this, but having some template in mind really helps. Usually what I'll do is after I do my keyword research, I know that there's a topic that people are searching. And so I'm going to use this problem, agitate, solution framework, the PAS here. And I'm going to just talk about and reference the source articles that I see. Hey, Spencer, I just saw your question about calls to action embedded throughout. I think it's a good idea, especially if the content is longer. Like here, if I'm shooting for 400 to 600 words, then really I want to rope them in with the content, and there's not probably a good exit point early. But if this content was a pillar piece and it was longer, it may be, they may be convinced long before they get to the end of it, and so you want to give them an off ramp to just go ahead and take action. Okay, so this template's available for you. These are some of the things that I think about when I put it together. And I have in WordPress, I have a draft template that has all of these things baked into it. So every time I create a new post, it has everything that I want to remember in terms of SEO and structure and story and everything. Okay. The next thing is that consistency is a big deal. Google likes consistency, and so do readers. But consistency is super hard for entrepreneurs. Like we're doing 1,000 different things, right? And so it's hard to say, hey, I'm going to publish at noon on Monday every week, or I'm going to publish every day at a set time. And so really the answer to that is batching your content. Batch your content creation and release it on schedule, but do all the content creation at one time. The other thing is that if you're doing like an email newsletter or something like this, curated content is also really good. That creates value for the reader. If you've gone through and said, here's a list of articles that I'm going to use to accompany mine that are also really good about this topic. You didn't have to write it. You just had to link to it or include snippets from it, and you get your reader gets the value, which comes back to you. Okay, then the last item that I'll talk about is promotion is really where you win with content. Regardless of how good the content is, if you don't promote, the content doesn't go anywhere. And so what I do is I build a promotion checklist, and this is also available for you to download, and you can see what mine looks like. Where every time I put an article out, and then also this is like the most unsexy part of content marketing. It's like, oh, okay, now I have to go and share this in all these 15 different places. But this is where people run into the content. This is taking that top of the funnel and making it wide so that people can find you. And so I will try to do this with every post, is go through the checklist. Is this appropriate for Twitter, for LinkedIn? And my checklist helps me make decisions that I don't have to remember. So for instance, like I have LinkedIn on my videos. Well, video on LinkedIn is like killing it right now. So if I make sure that's on my checklist, then I don't have to remember every time I create a video that, oh, hey, LinkedIn is a place I should share if I haven't been sharing there regularly. Okay, and that, my friends, is how we unleash an avalanche of awesome. I'll stop sharing and open for Q&A.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So Chad, I thought that was awesome, especially with things that I've been working on and will be working on. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how do you balance written content with like other content, like audio, like podcasts and videos, like on YouTube. How do you balance that with written content, and how do you integrate that into your content strategy? Yeah,
so one of the things about the hub and spoke thing is if you create a sort of comprehensive pillar piece of content, a lot of times it's that now becomes something that you dice and slice, and you take pieces of that and use elsewhere. You create videos based on similar things. You embed those videos in those articles. And so in terms of what to create, where I usually like to start is, where are you strong? Are you a good writer? Do you have access to good video production capabilities? Most of us do just with our smartphones. But lean into the thing where you're strong, and then branch out from there. That'd be my recommendation. But do take a look at, like, part of that promotion is, okay, maybe I have this pillar article. It's 2,500 words. It's exhaustive. How does that relate to TikTok? something that, or YouTube shorts, right? Something that is short form. It's like, well, I'm going to take an idea from there and I'm going to share it on YouTube shorts, or I'm going to take a quote from there, I'm going to tweet it. And so it becomes a resource where now you put in the time and effort to create this big thing. And now that is just the gift that keeps on giving, because you can peel a little piece of it off at a time, and it makes it easy to keep your publication schedule consistent. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So a quick question also around calendars, because obviously with content creation, I've seen a lot of different calendars, and how do you kind of like incorporate that idea into, like, I mean, this is like the little bits, and how do you do your big picture stuff?
Yeah, that's great. So also, you kind of have to tailor to where you are in your organization's maturity, right? If you have a big marketing team, then the content and the editorial and publication calendar becomes something that everybody's involved in. You're doing strategy sessions to map this out. If it's just you, then really it starts with understanding that the hub and spoke. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to start with a hub, and then I'm going to make spokes around it. And what's the pace that I think that I can execute, and so create your calendar based on what you think you can do. Really, that's the balance that I've always tried to strike, is like, well, I know I can write so much. So to be conservative, I'm going to cut that in half, and I'm going to use that volume of content to sort of schedule out my content creation calendar. Does that help, Nancy?
Great, thank you. Yeah, and just do you develop like kind of themes, like quarterly themes or monthly themes, or?
Yeah, so harken back to the keyword research. Also, I might have already some content, right? Like maybe I've been producing content, hasn't done very well, but I've done a bunch of research and a bunch of writing. Maybe I can take that content and I can refresh it, repurpose it. Maybe I can combine some pieces, or peel some other things off, and now deploy it into the new strategy. That can be really efficient.
Fabulous.
It's nice
Thank
too,
you
because
so
then you don't
much.
have stuff that's wasted. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Did I go through that too quick? We're on track, right?
No, we're good.
So I mean, I guess one more question then. Do you like allocate, because I don't have a big marketing department, but do you allocate like a certain day of the week to like get all your content done and then release it at different times? I mean, do you have any, advice on how to be as effective and as efficient? I love the repurposing, definitely have lots of stuff to repurpose, but I always, consistency is probably my biggest downfall.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's a right way to do it, but the thing that I like to do for myself is that I know that there are times of day and times of the week where I'm more productive at generating content. It's easier for me to get into the flow of writing. It's easy, like it may be good for me to do my promotion towards the end of the day, schedule all my stuff, because maybe my creative energy is low then, and maybe I'm more creative in the mornings. And so I kind of try to map, my goals in terms of how much content I'm creating to my personal, where my personal energy and creativity is best deployed. And sometimes that means that, maybe it's a chunk every day. We spend a little time writing and promoting every day. Maybe I'm going to do it, once a week. But it's my best advice. There's probably people on the call that have could add more to that question.
I was actually going to just say what I did. I found that I'm a horrible writer. Like I'm decent at writing, but I don't like it. I don't go there very well. And so we actually started a podcast, and I just started interviewing other SaaS founders, and I really love talking. And I really apparently love the sound of my own voice. So I was all about like asking them questions, and the interview and the rapport was super exciting and fun. And then all of that content can then be handed to somebody to throw into otter.ai and transcribe it and massage that into a blog post. And then, out of those episodes, and we actually never got our content engine up and running to the point where we actually started repurposing it all. But I could see how very quickly you could take a podcast and turn it into all of those other channels.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, if there's anything that that I love about what you just said, Will, it's this notion of here's a way to do it that I liked. It was fun. Because the positive energy about, like, it's like you don't want to be a dirge, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to go, write for a half an hour again, and if that's not what makes your socks go up and down, like you find the things that are fun. Like podcasting is fun. I love creating videos, mostly because I like working with a team to do that. Writing is fun for me, but I can't do it all day, every day. And so just trying to map.
Will, do you actually do your podcast on Zoom and then repurpose it as video content as well?
So I went and bought myself a mic, and you don't actually need a mic. That was one of the things I found fascinating. When we built our podcast, it was actually not about producing any content that anybody actually wanted to hear. It was about me getting an excuse to talk to the founders of SaaS companies. And so I'd get on the phone with them and I'd say, man, that was a fantastic conversation. So just out of curiosity, would you guys be open to a partnership? And it was a really, you just spent an hour building rapport with them, and I asked all about their stuff. And we ended up getting the founder of Zapier on our podcast, and he told about his founding story. We built up, he wasn't the first one. And we, pulled a lot of relationship strings to get him there. But the podcasting thing for us, it wasn't about the content. And now that I'm looking back, I'm like, man, had I actually started that engine, I wonder I wonder how much more we could have gotten out of that. Cause I still have 2 seasons worth of podcasts. We did 27 or 28 different episodes. And it was super fun. I loved talking to the people, and they enjoyed talking to me. And it was a good way for us to create content, because I like talking. I don't love writing.
Well, and there's a parallel to that in written content too, right? If let's say that I am doing my keyword research and I'm finding some really strong articles about questions that I want to answer that search intent. Well, a lot of times if I cite somebody in my article and I send them back, right, there's a chance they'll link to my article, which helps with SEO. Also a chance that they'll share it with their audience, which may very well be much bigger than mine. It's being able to make those connections around what you're writing with what other people are doing is a really strong way of getting the word out there and getting more shares.
Everybody needs more good content.
Yeah. I'm thinking about what you're doing, Alan, with audio too, right? The idea of taking somebody's content and running it through your system and then sending it back to them. It's like, hey, this is, now I've got your content with all this, audio enhancement done to it. And who's not going to share that? It's good stuff.
Yeah, if we can find a way to be able to say that in half of a sentence, to be able to grab people's attention, saying oh, if I listen to this, it's going to be better for me. Still working on that.
Yeah.
But I do have a question for you. Do you use a formula, or have you seen other CMOs build a formula for time management? I'm back on the slide that says no pain, no gain, typically 3 to 6 months to see results. So on your team, when you're building content, what percentage of let's just say, and I'm going to narrow it down because we know it's not true, what percentage of the 40-hour work week is typically designated for a person to work on content marketing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. I think in order to do content and have it produce results for you, right, to be a significant channel of inbound leads, you need to dedicate some time to it. But who you have on your team that is generating content or promoting it, you may have people that are more or less efficient in how quick it is for, so you have somebody who's a great writer, they might be able to generate a week or a month's worth of content in a day. Mm-hmm. Where if or they might just be fast. Templates and frameworks increase the efficiency and speed of everybody. It's like, okay, I like getting into a rhythm of how you produce content. It's like, okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do my keyword research. Then I'm going to find 3 articles that are really strong about this. I'm going to read them and I'm going to pull quotes out and digest their information. And then I'm going to use those. I'm going to take those quotes and I'm going to drop them into my template framework. Now my article is already 75% of the way done. I'm going to go through it and make it mine, make sure I'm linking internally, all the structural things. And you start to do that and rinse and repeat, you get to be pretty efficient at generating content that is high volume and good quality. And so how much of the 40-hour work week, I can't tell you, but if you are going to do it, you need, and the other thing too is it's not like you just throw this stuff up in the ether and wait for 6 months and then go check and see if it worked, right? Like for me, like I like to use free tools, so I'm using Google Analytics and Search Console, and I'm watching my page rank. I should see my page rank should move almost immediately, right? Certainly within a week, my page rank should move, but I might not be on page 1. Right, it takes some time to move through that, and there may be things that I need to do, like time for my promotion to take hold, for people to see it, like it, share it. All of those things. There's kind of a snowball that takes some time to build. So I'm watching it right at the beginning, and every week, right, I'm saying, okay, here's the keyword phrases that we want to rank for with our content program, and how are we doing in terms of of capturing the page rank that we need? How are we doing in terms of downloads of our lead magnet? Just basic KPIs. And then the work that I put in this week should influence that for next week. But maybe you commit to it and say, okay, I'm gonna take 1 day a week and I'm gonna run my content program based on whatever I can muster and produce in 1 day a week, and then try to maximize your efficiency with that 1 day.
Okay.
Chad, I have a question, and it might be a bit specific or narrow, but if you're preparing to go to a conference, is there specific, I guess, advice that you'd have as far as content or what to post or where to post to try to kind of milk that opportunity as much as you can?
Yeah, so a bunch of things that I would look at are, is there like a events page? Is the conference doing promotion of its event already? And what can we piggyback on there? Can we like repost, like I kind of go put a comment on the event page on the event's Facebook page? Can I repost links to their event if they have a page on their website about it? A lot of times events will have hashtags that are specific to their event. Am I using those? So for people who are looking for me on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, am I showing up when they're searching for content related vendors? And a lot of times, like you go to a conference, could be, they come in all different sizes, right? But let's say you have a conference, it's a moderate sized event. Competing for attention with everybody who's on the floor is way harder than competing with everybody who's on Twitter, because not everybody's on Twitter. And so you can, and now you won't capture the same percentage of the conference, but you can own some of those smaller spaces easily by using the hashtag, by posting things that are interesting and relevant. Certainly, one of the things that we've had success with at events is running like Facebook ads using their local, like we drop a pin on the event. I think it's as tight as like maybe a mile, maybe half a mile. And we say anybody who's traveled over 100 miles that falls inside that that geography, we're going to show a Facebook ad to them, inviting them to come to our booth and enter a drawing. Right? So the drawing is my lead magnet, the invitation is my call to action, and I'm using an ad and a little piece of content that drives people to that. Yeah, is that helpful,
That's awesome.
Parker?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Hi, Chad. First off, that was an awesome presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just have a question. Yeah, you're welcome. Just have a question. You mentioned that consistency and volume are very important. And so a lot of business owners, that's their challenge, right? And so for a lot of them, the solution would be to automate. So the question is, do you use like an automation tool, like a social media calendar, anything like that? And if so, what would you recommend?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. Like Will has got to be salivating over that one. And
Go for it.
it does so much automation work, but so I think it depends on the size and scope of your operation. If you're one person, automation is a good way to get more efficient. Sometimes automation tools can be expensive. So do what's in your budget, match your budget and your capacity. But I think to the extent that you can automate those things, like it's just about driving efficiency, right? I mean, automation is doing something that you would do manually, and instead of manually repeating it, you're gonna implement a system and an algorithm to do that work for you. And so, in terms of specific tools, I'm sort of since I created CMO Zen last November, most of this is one-man show work for me. So sometimes, I'm just using the scheduling tools and scheduling my posts, or I'm just taking scheduling my own time to go through and look at my promotional checklist. But there's a ton of things that could be automated. Like you can make every time you post something, it sends a tweet. It does it. There's an unlimited number of automations you could deploy. And so what I would do is I would find a place to start. Like I'm a very big fan of you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And so rather than just getting overwhelmed with all the things you could do, start creating content, start promoting content, start automating the things that you're doing, that you're repeating a lot. And just keep that context also mean that your eyes will be open as you're looking for ways to automate. Like what tools should I use? It's way easier to figure that out if you have a program that's running. So
Do it 5 times manually.
Yeah.
Then automate.
Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. That was fun.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks everyone for joining in. And Chad put in the comments, for those of you who came a little late, a link to the presentation. And I'm assuming, well, I'll just commit Taylor. Taylor's going to send that out. He's going to add that to the LinkedIn post that he already put today, so you can find that there. And then, as always, if you think there's someone who should be in this group and get to know people and needs an opportunity to virtually network once a week, invite them. It's always fun to see new faces. And we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, you guys. Take care.